What is up, ladies and gentle nerds? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and today we are looking at another random card because it is in fact Random Wednesday here on the Overthinking MTG podcast, the show where we take a look at an individual Magic card and talk about it for at least 10 minutes. And today we are on Scryfall, and we are going to press the random card button, and we are going to see what we come up with. So let's go ahead and hit it and see what we've got. I have no idea what we're about to jump into, so let's go ahead and go. All right, today we got Sterling Grove, specifically the version of Sterling Grove from Modern Horizons 2. This card is one of those great cards that actually I had a copy of back in the day. It was originally from, I want to say, Invasion. It's something in that block, but it's actually absolutely fantastic. So here's what it does. It's an enchantment for 1 green, 1 white. Sorry, let me say that again. For green, white. Total converted mana cost of 2. Sorry, total mana value of 2. And it's an enchantment that says other enchantments you control have Shroud. Shroud being the precursor to Hexproof, and Shroud is Shroud is an ability rather that says it cannot be the target of spells or abilities. That includes abilities you control. It includes abilities your opponents control. And then you can pay 1, sacrifice Sterling Grove, search your library for an enchantment card, reveal it, shuffle it, and put that card on top. So this card is fantastic. It's a tutor that also protects your enchantments. This is a must in decks that are trying to build around the Enchantress style, where you use cards like Enchantress's Presence or I believe Argothian Enchantress, that whenever you cast out enchantments, or Sithis from Modern Horizons 2 as well, when you cast spells, when you cast enchantment spells, you draw cards. Or when enchantments enter the battlefield, you draw cards. Crazy, like that's a synergy that exists a lot. And so cheap enchantments are huge in those types of situations. And naturally, you're going to be worried about your opponents casting spells that can destroy those enchantments. There are some spells that do exist that can board wipe enchantments, cards like Tranquility, which is an old one that you don't see very often. I don't think it's been reprinted in a long time, that just says destroy all enchantments. That's a very specific type of hate that could go up against this card very, very nicely, but we just don't see it very often. Meanwhile, Sterling Grove did recently see a reprint in Modern Horizons 2. It's a card that had not been injected into the Modern format until recently, and not only was it injected into Modern via Modern Horizons 2, it was also included in Modern Horizons, it was also included in Jumpstart Historic Horizons. So this card is actually legal in Historic on Arena, which is dope. You can do all kinds of fun stuff with this. Although I gotta be honest, if I'm in the Historic queue and somebody drops a Sterling Grove on turn 2, I'm assuming the Solemnity 9 lives combo is coming next. And what that combo is it basically is a 2-card combo that says you cannot lose the game. And both of those cards are enchantments. And because of that, Sterling Grove not only allows you to search them up, so it's a 2-card combo you can tutor up, but additionally, it gives them, if you have them, and you also have Sterling Grove, it protects them by giving them Shroud. So cards that can destroy individual permanents or destroy enchantments like Feed the Swarm or just good old Disenchant can't touch them. They just can't. Now, in the case of 9 lives, it has Hexproof anyway, so that's kind of irrelevant. But, the Shroud is very meaningful. Now, interestingly enough, one downside, there is a massive downside, and there is one situation where you might look at this card and think, oh, I need this in my Boggles deck. And I would highly recommend you don't play it in your Boggles deck. And if you're not sure what I'm referring to, it depends. There are some situations in which it can work just fine, but there are others in which it won't. If the creature so Boggles is a style where you have a creature and you put enchantments and equipment or whatever onto that creature to buff it up, and you protect it somehow. Now, Slippery Boggle, the original card from which the deck was named, is a 1/1 for 1 with Hexproof. So it wears equipment and enchantments very, very well. So you load it up with enchantments, it's almost impossible to deal with, it's almost impossible to touch, and you just swing in for the win. So you just buff up this one little critter and you just beat your opponent to death with it. That's the goal. Give it flying, give it unblockable, make it indestructible, those kinds of things, and just buff its stats. So a 1/1 quickly becomes a 9/9, and all of a sudden, you're going to work. If you're targeting a creature that has Hexproof like that, it's fine. If, however, you are targeting an enchantment creature, so if you say, for example, if you're running a Boggles deck on Arena, you might be running Alseid of Life's Bounty. It is a 1/1 lifelinker for 1. However, it is an enchantment creature. The fact that it's a 1/1 lifelinker, for one, means it's a great boggles target. You can load up all kinds of goodies on top of it and just smack your opponent and gain life while you're doing it. Great, right? It's like, it works exactly the way you want it to, as long as some of those enchantments can help protect it. Cool. However, the moment Sterling Grove is on the battlefield, all Seed of Life's Bounty, because it is an enchantment creature, it has Shroud. Now, we might be thinking, okay, that's great. That means my opponents can't target it, right? What's the problem? Yeah, but it means you can't target it either, which means you can't put auras onto it, because auras are spells that target when you first cast them. Therefore, you won't be able to attach auras to this type of creature to boggle it out, if you will. At least I'm fairly confident that is how it works. Enchantments are weird like that. But yeah, so that's an issue. So we do want to... Shroud is two ways. Shroud naturally balances itself. Now, the reason that they kind of went away from Shroud, like, we don't see Shroud very often anymore, and if this card wasn't a reprint of an older set, it would probably say Hexproof. Like, let's be honest, that's probably what it would say. Meanwhile, there's actually another card called Privileged Position, which is in green and white as well, but it's all hybrid. I believe it's 4 mana that gives all enchantments you control hexproof. So it's very similar, but it's different. So that those exist, but you notice that it costs twice as much because it doesn't have that automatic balancing factor of not allowing you to target your stuff. Hexproof is infinitely better than Shroud. And from what I understand, as an avid listener to Mark Rosewater's podcast, I don't read his blog as much as I ought to, but I'm constantly consuming information about Magic and information from the development team. And my understanding was their perception of Shroud was that everyone was playing it the way that people play Hexproof. So people were still targeting their own stuff with Shroud all the time, even though they technically can't do it. And so that's why the cards like Invisible Stalker, that's a 1/1 for 1, 1/1 for 2 unblockable Shroud, is a great example of a card that people were boggling. Like, people were enchanting it, and you technically can't do that. But people were. And so as a result, the developers look at it and it's like, this just apparently isn't intuitive enough. Like, people aren't realizing how this functions. And so as a result, they changed it from Shroud to Hexproof and changed the pricing accordingly. Hexproof is more valuable than Shroud. You will find creatures that have Shroud all over the multiverse, but there are a handful that have... You will find creatures that have Shroud from older sets. Let me put it that way. There are a lot of older set creatures that have Shroud. I believe Simic Skyswallower is an example of one as well, in addition to the Stalker that I mentioned. These are cards that cannot be the target. In a lot of cases, actually printed on the card, it says this cannot be the target of spells or abilities. Which is funny because when it's spelled out like that and it's not keyworded, it's even more clear because it specifically says this creature cannot be the target of spells or abilities. Period. Like, all spells, all abilities can't be targeted. But it's easy to look at that and only see the positive. And so that's why they ended up going with Hexproof. And additionally, interestingly enough, they've made some modifications to that too by introducing Ward in Strixhaven, I believe, where when a creature is targeted by a spell or ability, it is countered unless the person pays a certain amount. When I first saw Ward, I assumed Ward was going to replace Hexproof completely. I didn't think Hexproof was going to be a thing anymore. And it turns out that that's not accurate. I mean, they printed the card Avabrook Caretaker in Crimson Vow, and it not only has Hexproof, but if it's nighttime, it gives all of your other permanents Hexproof. So clearly Hexproof's not gone. And based on the reception that card has gotten, especially from the limited community, I would be shocked if we see more Hexproof coming in the future, because it is not a particularly well-loved card. It's a bomb that is very, very difficult to interact with and very, very difficult to beat. Again, especially in limited circumstances. It doesn't really see much constructed play, as I understand, just because it costs 6. That's the only reason. Excuse me. But anyway... Going back to Sterling Grove, the ability to give all the other enchantments you control Shroud is excellent because it definitely, it helps protect different combo pieces. Also, if you use a spell, so if you have this in a green, white, blue list, for example, that's running a Bant list, if you will, that's running, say, Diplomatic Immunity, which is an aura that has Shroud that gives a creature Shroud. Like, you put that... Actually, that's a bad example. But if you use like Prismatic Ward or something that gives a creature protection from all types of things, if you can find a way to make a creature that you have boggled up very difficult to touch, Sterling Grove makes it impossible for them to blast any of the enchantments on it. So you have one enchantment that grants hexproof or indestructible or any of those abilities to a creature. All of a sudden, the moment you put Sterling Grove down, that creature is effectively untouchable. It is almost impossible to deal with, which is awesome. And again, if the creature itself is not an enchantment as well, you can continue to target it with stuff potentially, depending on the enchantment that you use. Anyway, Sterling Grove is a really cool card. It is great for enchantment strategies. It's great in situations where you want to be able to fetch up specific enchantments. Also, there are some outside-the-box uses for this that could be really, really cool. Like in Abzan decks, you could use this to fetch up Meathook Massacre. It is easy to forget that Meathook Massacre is in fact an enchantment because it functions like a sorcery board wipe, but it's not. It's an enchantment. Or functions similarly to a sorcery board wipe. It sticks around, of course, by virtue of it being an enchantment, but it's a permanent with mana value too. And so Sterling Grove could theoretically fetch up Meathook Massacre and put it on the top. Therefore, if you have 4 Sterling Groves in your deck, you could have a toolbox enchantment deck that has all kinds of weird, goofy enchantments that do all kinds of weird, goofy things throughout whatever the course of the format that you're playing in, whether that's historic, modern, vintage, legacy, whatever you're playing. You can do some crazy banana stuff with this just because of that ability to search. Now, there is an important note, and that is the enchantment that you search up goes on top of your library, not into your hand. So this is not card advantageous. So you need to have some other way to draw cards or to really or just accept that it's just going to be the card that you draw next turn. So there's that. But in an Enchantress situation, where whenever you play an enchantment, you draw a card, you're going to be drawing plenty of cards. Those cards, or those decks, have a tendency to fill up very, very fast. Cards like Sithis, Core Blademaster, SRAM, all of these are going to be drawing additional cards. And so a lot of the time, these situations, the fact that Sterling Grove itself does not put the card into your hand is not a problem. You will be drawing plenty of cards. It will be just fine. So I know I've gone up against decks running Sterling Grove in Historic on Arena, and they're pretty cool to see. Like, it's actually a lot of fun to watch them pop off because they result in some very powerful, very cool combo plays and very cool value engines, which is really my favorite part of Magic. I love watching a cool value engine really do its thing and generate all kinds of cool effects on the battlefield. I prefer when I'm piloting it and it's going off, but when my opponent goes off and does something interesting, especially something that I haven't seen before, it makes me so happy. I love that stuff. And Sterling Grove is a cool enabler if you're using enchantments. So I gotta say, this is a cool card. I'm glad we ran into it for today. It's also interesting that we hit 2 low-cost enchantments. So again, if you're running it, this is another thing I mentioned last week with Seal of Removal. If you're running Lurrus, you can actually use Lurrus's ability to pull Sterling Grove from your graveyard onto the battlefield. So that's a cool situation. So Sterling Grove is Lurrus compatible, which is always nice. Makes it viable in certain ways. And the fact that it sacrifices itself in order to tutor up your next draw means that it can put itself in the graveyard for value, and then you can use Lurrus to pull it back out. That's just lovely. And the fact that Lurrus is white-black means that you don't even need to go outside of these 2 colors to make it work. So there's a cool deck in there somewhere. I'm going to have to tinker with it and see what I can do. So thank you so much for hanging out. I appreciate you. You can catch me on Twitch, twitch.tv/hamhawks42. If you've enjoyed this video and you're watching on the YouTube feed, please don't hesitate to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps a ton. And if you're listening on the podcast feed, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you. If you wouldn't mind leaving a 5-star review in your podcast app of choice, that also helps out that algorithm so much. I cannot express how grateful I am. I'm just grateful to have you here. But yeah, if you would help out in that way, it would mean a lot. Thank you so much. Let me say that one more time. Thank you so much. Have a phenomenal day, and I'll catch you on the next one.